So today's lesson's on the quadratic formula, right? And again, it looks real intimidating, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. So the standard form of a quadratic function is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, right? Now, the first thing we're going to talk about with the quadratic formula is what we call the discriminant. And the discriminant is equal to the b squared minus 4ac. Okay, and what the discriminant tells us is it basically tells us the number of solutions. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Well, when we look at it, if you get a discriminant with a value of that's positive, you will end up with two solutions, meaning you'll get two answers. If you have a discriminant that's equal to 0, you would have one solution. And if you have a discriminant that has a negative value, right away, your answer for now would be that there is no solution. Okay, so let's take a look at how we use the discriminant. In this first example, when we go to evaluate the discriminant, right, we're going to take the b squared minus 4ac, and if I look here, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 9, and c is equal to 18. So what we're going to do is plug those values in. So we're going to say 9 squared minus 4 times a is 1 times c is 18. If we plug this in the calculator exactly the way we see it, you will get a discriminant with a value of 9. If your discriminant is 9, this quadratic will have two solutions. Okay? So you look at the next one. My discriminant. I'm going to take a is 1, b is 18, c is 81. So 18 squared minus 4 times 1 times 81. Again, we're using the b squared minus 4ac. And right away, 18 squared minus 4 times 1 times 81 is 0. So your quadratic here would have one solution. So now the last one, first thing we have to do here is set it equal to 0. So x squared, we would add 8 to both sides, so plus 8 is equal to 0. Now in this one, your value of a is 1, b is 0, there's no x term, so we're going to say 0, and c is 8. So now when I go to evaluate the discriminant, right, I'm going to get b squared, which is 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8, which is going to give you negative 32. And if your discriminant is negative, right away, you can put no solution. Okay. So the next example says solve the quadratic equation. If you look, you'll notice that this is not factorable. You could complete the square on it to solve it, but we're going to go and talk about another, process that's much easier, and that's called the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of, it's technically the b squared minus 4ac, but we say the discriminant all over 2 times a. So the first thing we have to do is set the quadratic equal to 0. Then we basically evaluate the discriminant Then last, we evaluate the quadratic formula. So let's take a look at the first example here. Okay, so right away we look, this is already set equal to 0. So when I look, a is equal to 2, b is equal to 6, c is equal to 3. So now the first thing I do is evaluate the discriminant. Okay, and with my discriminant, I'm going to do 6 squared minus 4 times a is 2 times c is 3. And that would give me 36 minus, so 36 minus 4 times 2 times 3 will give you 12. So right away, now that I evaluate the discriminant, I know there's going to be 2 solutions. So now how do I find the solutions? Well, x equals, we use x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of that discriminant all over 2a. So right away, if b is 6, remember we take the opposite of 6, which is negative 6, plus or minus the square root of, we already said the discriminant was 12, all over 2 times a is 2. Sorry. Okay, so all we did was take the values of a, b, and c and plug them in. Now, I have to break this up into 2 problems. One is negative 6 plus the square root of 12 all over 4. Okay, the other one would be negative 6 minus the square root of 12 all over 4. So I'm going to break it up, and right now I'm going to plug these in the calculator. So the first thing I do when I do it, and I'm going to tell you to practice this on the calculator along with me, you always have to put the numerator in and then divide by the denominator. So negative 6 plus the square root of 12, hit enter, and then divide by 4. You get x equals negative 0.63. Okay, the next one, I'm just going to say x equals negative 6 minus the square root of 12, right? And then right away divide that by 4. So and you get negative 2.37. So right away your 2 solutions are negative 0.63 and negative 2.37. Okay. So in this next example, the first thing we want to do is go ahead and find or set this equal to 0. To set this equal to 0, subtract 12x from this side, line it up under its like terms. I'm going to add 9 to both sides. It has no like term over there, so I scoot it over, but I'm going to write it in standard form, 25x squared minus 30x, right? And then plus 9 equals 0. Okay? So now, once I have it set equal to 0, I'm going to evaluate the discriminant. So the discriminant here would be negative 30 squared minus 4 times a times c, right? And when you evaluate this, you get 0. What this means is you're going to get one solution in the end, right? So I'll show you what I mean by that. So once you go to do this, you're going to say the opposite of b. So if b is negative 30, we would get positive 30 plus or minus the square root of 0 all divided by 2 times 25. Now, if you really think about it, we could break this up into two problems, but 30 plus 0 divided by 50 will be the same as 30 minus 0 divided by 50. So does it really matter, right? When you do this, you'll get one answer in the end, and that is x equals 30 over 50, which would give you 0.6. All right. And number 3. When we look at number 3, first thing we want to do is set this equal to 0. But if I can make this x squared positive, that's going to be the easiest way to go about it. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides, but then I'm going to move the 4x over by subtracting it. Now I end up with positive x squared minus 4x, since 5 is positive, plus 5 equals 0. Now I can evaluate the discriminant. So this discriminant would be b squared, so negative 4 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times 5. So right away here, 16, what is that, plus 20 will give you 36. Our discriminant here is 36, so this will give us two solutions. So right away, my two solutions are x equals, the opposite of b is going to be positive 4 plus or minus the square root of 36 divided by 2 times 1. And when we break this up into two problems, we get 4 plus the square root of 36 all over 2. And my second solution would be 4 minus the square root of 36 all over 2. That gives you 4 plus 6 divided by 2, which gives you 10 divided by 2, which gives you one solution would be 5. My other solution would be 4 minus the square root of 36, which is 6, divided by 2, which gives you negative 2 over 2, which ends up being a solution of negative 1. Some of you may have noticed that that was factorable at the beginning, right? So if you factored to solve it, that is fine. All right, so go ahead, try the homework, and we'll fine-tune this tomorrow.